All right, good evening, and welcome to the Co-op Navigator Challenge. I'm your host, Johan Matthews, a member of the learning team here at the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. And today we'll be engaging in a bit of collective recollection. We'll be recording this session for our audiences to send out later for those who couldn't make it. And so if you have a problem with that, feel free to leave your camera off, but you should be fine. Today, we've invited a few of the members of our Co-op Navigator Fellowship community to reflect on our shared experiences over the past 2 years as we've been navigating this fellowship and this learning experience together. This webinar, this session is brought to you by the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, who for over 50 years, almost 50 years now, has been providing funding for co-ops, co-op friendly and designed specifically for co-ops, financial products, loans, and so on, and serving as an investment opportunity that promotes socially conscious enterprise. We also have a learning team, of which I am a member of, who supports co-ops at no cost. And since 2019, we've provided hundreds of hours of support to hundreds of co-ops and co-op curious entrepreneurs. And so no matter your stage of growth, you can reach out to us. Our team of coaches and, myself, Maggie, Carolyn, Carla will help you to clarify your next steps and identify options for support. If you're looking to get in touch, reach out, coopfund.coop/coaching. Today, we'll go for about 90 minutes. First, I'll give an overview of the fellowship for those who are tuning in for the first time. Then we'll engage in a bit of community reflection, reflecting on our journeys together over the past 2 years with the Co-op Navigator Fellowship. At the end, if there's any questions, you can ask them then. So before we begin, I would like to invite you to reflect for a moment as someone who's watching this. I want you to think about a time when you tried to solve a personal problem, be it access to food or access to affordable housing, or even a livelihood, a job, work, solving a personal problem by working together with other people in your community. What was that experience like, working with others? Did you need help? Who helped you? Were there resources available in your community to help move things forward? Why? Why not? And ultimately, if you did receive help, whether it was from in your community or outside of it, how did that feel? How did that feel? These are some of the questions we're going to be exploring today. And these are some of the questions that this fellowship that we are going to discuss was designed to help solve. You see, we recognized throughout our time doing this work as an organization that our nation's history of racially motivated economic exclusion had left emerging communities across the Northeast, these are racialized communities and so on, low-income communities and so on, with limited access to culturally relevant co-op development. So a lot of communities don't have the conditions that support co-op life. They don't have that neighborhood that support co-op life, that ecosystem. Recognizing that, we considered what were the conditions that would help certain communities to support cooperative enterprise and to help them get started and grow. And so we dedicated over $800,000 of our net assets to try to address this problem. How do we change the face of the co-op movement, knowing that some faces were left out? And so we began this journey by working together with Black leaders, Latinx leaders, Indigenous leaders across the Northeast to figure out what conditions were necessary to support the development of co-ops in their environments, in their ecosystems, because they were trying and striving to develop community-owned and governed enterprises, and there aren't necessarily the conditions at play to support that in some of these communities. So recognizing that, we came up with this 3-year fellowship. In this 3-year fellowship, we partnered with locally led, community-centered economic development organizations across the Northeast. And we partnered with them for 3 years to hire, train, and mentor local co-op interested organizers and entrepreneurs, individuals in their community who are trying to do collective ownership, community ownership, cooperative ownership in some way, shape, or form, and who could benefit from this experience and who would return to their communities as co-op navigators. In the 3 years, fellows are engaged in a community of practice. They're working with each other with CFNE and with mentors across the country to receive that mentorship training and connections in a trusted way, in a way that reflects their own experience, while gaining exposure to co-op initiatives locally and across the country and across the Northeast, identified by their host sites. And so these fellows study these successful models and help their communities to identify co-opportunities, areas where we can engage in co-ops, cooperative enterprise in ways that reflect and affirm our cultures, and help the host sites to embed these learnings as established practices. So that's what we've been doing for the last 3 years. And now I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and invite up a few of our fellows to talk a bit about their experiences. What's going on, bro? We got Veru, we got Desi. Cool glasses, Desi. Good to see you. Steph, my guy. Good to have you. And I think we have probably who's on the call. I know there's David and Swain. So we got 3 out of 5 fellows right now. And we're just gonna dive in. So I want to invite you guys to introduce yourselves a little bit and share a little bit about what this was like for you to show up in your own community. Some of you have been in the game, some of you are new to the game, as the face of the co-op movement. Because one thing that I recognize as a face of the co-op movement in my own environment is that when I tell people about this, they say, why didn't I learn about co-ops? And I become the guy who helps them step into this world, right? The first impressions might have been the local food co-op, right? And they had no clue what a co-op is from that experience, right? It's expensive, it's fresh. They want to go there for the fresh, healthy stuff, but it's still not really connecting, right? So why didn't I learn about it? And I become the face. I want to invite you, and we can start with you, Varun. I know you've had some interesting thoughts on this. Introduce yourself and tell us what it's been like being the face, at least over the past 2 years, of the co-op movement in your community.
Yeah, thanks, Johan. Can y'all hear me okay? Awesome. So yeah, I'm Varun, coming from Hartford, Connecticut. I work at Reset, which is a nonprofit that supports social entrepreneurs here in the Hartford area. And I came into this fellowship really green, really new to the co-op movement. And I think, as we were preparing for this, yeah, I was just really thinking about in some ways, like I still feel like I have a lot to learn. I think in some ways I know I didn't know what I didn't know when I started. And I think the past 2 years of this fellowship has really revealed to me how much I have to learn and confirmed to me that this is the work I want to be doing in a lot of ways for the rest of my life. And so but to be the face it's a tremendous responsibility. And so I feel, it was yeah, just sharing earlier, I feel like I have been trying to be the hands of the co-op movement here in Connecticut. We're the state in the Northeast, with one of the least developed co-op ecosystems. My organization is new to co-ops. Like I think I know more in just these 2 years than I think anyone else on my team. I think I can say that confidently. And I think we're eager to learn, but I think it's an uphill battle. I think there's just a lot of just business as usual here in Connecticut. We're kind of the capital of insurance and the finance industry, and so there's a lot of individualism and a lot of competition um, and a lot of focus on resisting the kind of systems that are impacting our communities, and less, I think, or a growing, there's a small and growing movement of people looking to build the next economy and build alternative structures to care for each other. And I'm just grateful to be part of, to have the opportunity through this fellowship to be kind of learn and to experiment and be able to fail and not feel like, I think like that I have to know it all, because I think there's so many different kinds of co-ops, and there's so many, different kinds of co-op ecosystems, and I think it's yeah, so I guess I'll stop there, but yeah, it's been a crash course. It's been a wild ride. Um, and yeah, lucky to not be alone in this on this journey.
Yes, excellent. Yes, that's true. I think it's something we forget coming into a movement at this point in time. It seems as though you're the first, you're alone, but put into the context of the fellowship, you recognize it's less true. And some of us, we've been in it for a while now, so we're not so new. And, maybe I'll invite Steph with that point to share a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself. You've had a bit more of an extensive relationship with the co-op movement, but what's it been like for you to be a fellow and kind of engage in the communities you've engaged over the last 2 years as the face of the co-op movement today?
Yeah, hi, I'm Steph Wiley. I own a worker-owned cooperative called Brooklyn Packers um, in Bed-Stuy, New York City, and we've been around for almost 9 years, and started to develop about 10 years ago. And yeah, coming into the co-op world was um, not so foreign to me in terms of like practice, but we practice cooperation in informal ways in my family and in my community. But like the formality of it was definitely foreign in kind of structure. Um, I've been a business owner prior to this, um, developing Brooklyn Packers. So I'm familiar with like business and owning business and being an entrepreneur because I've been there for a long time. But um, coming into a structure that we're all making decisions together and we're all profiting equally in some way. Yeah, that was new, and that definitely took and takes some getting used to. But I think it's the only really kind of the only way that makes sense to run businesses and also to run lives, actually, because we're human beings. It's in our DNA to cooperate, um, and that's actually the only reason why we're here. There are a lot of things that would have happened differently if we did not do that. And so, coming into the cooperative movement in about 10 years ago, it was very rare to see African American, Black male in this movement, because this movement is mostly Latinx immigrant women. And so, being that face at that time, I definitely was like, whoa, it took me, it took some getting used to, because I also used to do advocacy work as part of NICNOC, New York City Network of Worker-Owned Cooperatives. And so I did that for a few years. And so I was really in the co-op movement for real, like advocating for the expansion and development of co-ops. And I loved it, and I loved it. I still do that in informal ways now. But being like taking it very seriously, like seeing my place in it and seeing like how important it is to be this face, to have this face in the cooperative movement, and helping other people see like, oh no, you can do it too. You know, like it's representation, and we all know representation is important. Um, and you know, we've been fortunate enough to still be here, just not only as a cooperative but as a business. You know, to be around for 9 years is you know is a thing, definitely. And we learned a lot, and you learn a lot about business, and we learn about a lot about each other, and we learn a lot about cooperation and how all those things evolve over time. Um, and so it's definitely been a journey. Being in the fellowship has been a fantastic experience for me because I was doing less cooperative work, um, mainly due to like really trying to get the business part right. Um, you know, sometimes that takes you off the off the mark, off the square, you know. And so you know, being a part of this fellowship kind of just reintroduced to me the importance of like cooperative values, cooperative principles, cooperative ecosystem, uh, and how much better not only like my business is because of it, but also my life is because of it, and because I really believe in cooperative as life. And so, yeah, I'm so happy to have been a part of this and to continue to be a part of this, and to be here with such amazing people by my side to do it. You know, I've been in it for a long time, probably the longest out of all the fellows, but I learned so much from them also, and so I see it as a a little circular system of teaching and learning, and that definitely keeps me inspired every day. Thanks.
Wow. Yes, thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely, a multi-factor equation, business, the cooperative, it feels as though they could be distinct, but they come together and it's kind of integral to life ultimately, right? It's integral to business, even though our systems are so burdened by isolation and capitalism. So I appreciate that. Desi, share a little bit about yourself and what it's been like to be the face in the context that you're in. You're a pretty unique one up in Maine
Oh
with the
yeah.
tribes.
My name's Desiree Nicole Lester, and yeah, zooming in from Rockland, Maine today. I'm originally from Portland, Maine, and so I've traveled and kind of lived all over, and found myself back home. And I think that I mean, my background, really a community builder, very experienced in organizing and project management, strategic planning, and really helping kickstart new initiatives that are really community organized or that are emerging to address an issue or a need in community. And so that's really where I thrive and shine. I'm, of course, inaugural programming, I've got to be in it. So, it was really, of course, an alignment for me to be a part of this first cohort and be a part of this initiative. So I'm used to being the face for pioneering new initiatives for sure. It feels very familiar, very comfortable and uncomfortable for me, of course, at all times. And so, just thinking about a few things that you said, in the beginning, I think you asked like, why haven't I been introduced to cooperative principles? And, that resonates for me. It's because, why don't you know the names of the tribal land that you're standing on? That will start to answer your question. And for me, my host site is Four Directions Development Corporation, and they're representing the 5 Wabanaki tribes that are here in Maine. And that really resonates for me as to why I've never been introduced to cooperative principles, because it's the same reason why, I haven't learned those 5 tribe names until recently. And so, when you're thinking about what the cooperative movement looks like and, being the face of it, it's very exciting for me, but also very humbling, especially working with Indigenous communities. You can't always come in with excitement and move quickly. You have to really take the time to get to know the community, get to know who has shown up to educate, and kind of like bring in their concept of the way things should be done, and kind of like step back a little bit. So, it's really been a humbling experience for me, and, one that I don't take lightly. It's been a very incredible opportunity, to just amplify the values of collaboration, equity, and community empowerment, and that's what I think cooperatives stand for. I have this sense of responsibility to represent these ideals, in a way that is sustainable, not to just go into a community that I'm just getting to know and start something up and not be able to keep it going. That's really important. I got to show that I've got staying power, that I've got support and funding behind me. And I think those are often some of the hurdles that you come up against, when you're building a movement. You got to overcome misconceptions, because there's not just one way to build a cooperative. People like a neat path to plot out, but you got to do what works for you. You've got to listen to the voices and how people are voting and governing, or want to govern the body, and kind of move with that. So there's not just one way to get there cooperatively. And so I think, being the face, you gotta overcome a lot. You gotta overcome those hurdles, those misconceptions that people already have in their mind of what a cooperative is, or how it should be, or what it should look like, or how the route you have to take to get there. So.
Excellent, excellent. You guys are dropping gems already. I mean, thinking about what Varun was saying about, business as usual, and it seems like this is how you do business, co-ops are not a part of that. All of a sudden, we're trying to do this thing that seems new, even if there might be a rich legacy of cooperation, to everyone today is new. And I think with Steph showing up 10 years ago, 15 years ago, however long, many years ago, and being the only Black man in that space, because people are coming into this country with a context of what co-op means and trying to live that out. And sometimes that idea of a co-op is actually harmed, right? People have bad experiences overseas with the co-op and come here and think, oh no, I can't mess with that. That was a problem back home. Or maybe in Desi's case, folks came in with presuppositions and trying to impose a specific model. This is how you do a co-op, a more Europeanized idea, typical to bring that to the Indigenous communities, say this is how you do it. And so those things don't work, right? This concept is kind of harmed in a lot of different ways by capitalism and folks feeling isolated, but we know they're yearning for connection, right? We need to make our business work, get a livelihood going, but co-op is life. What is the point of spending 8 to 10 hours of our day in a space where there's no life there, right? So we need to make all these things work, and the concept of co-op might be burdened by all these things: capitalism, isolation, presupposition, and people coming in trying to impose one way to do these things. What have you guys experienced as ways to unburden this concept, whether you're defining it, redefining it for the first time? How have you guys kind of tried to help heal this concept of doing business together that we call co-ops, right? Just what's been your experience doing so? So I want to invite Varun again. Any thoughts you have on the topic?
Yeah, I think I want to share that, when I started this fellowship there, if you looked at the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives map, there were no co-ops in Connecticut. If you look today, there's one, and it's a worker-owned tortilleria in New Haven, the Tortilleria Semilla, that came out of grassroots organizing, and is a group of immigrants from Mexico who many of whom come from rich traditions of cooperation in their indigenous communities. And so, Javi Villatoro, shout out to Javi, who's been a founding board member and of our network that we've been building here in Connecticut. It's taught me so much about just the like ancestral traditions of the Zapatista, community and how much of this isn't a new concept. And that actually it's something that I think a lot of immigrant community, where I see the most growth in co-ops in Connecticut is in immigrant communities. And I think to Steph's point, like it's nationally, the majority of worker owners are Latinx immigrant women. And so I think that I really appreciate what Desi, what you shared, like just like the need to not come into a community with a deficit mindset and just to really like recognize what's the spirit of cooperation. I think Johan, you have talked about the spirit. Where is the spirit of cooperation? Even if folks aren't using that language or aren't incorporated legally as a co-op, right? But trying to identify where that exists. And I come out of community organizing, so I've worked in nonprofits for my whole career, and so there's cooperation looks like I've been learning more about worker self-directed nonprofits and how even outside of for-profit businesses, like there's ways that nonprofits can be practicing cooperation, and also recognizing that co-ops are I think not being dogmatic that co-ops are the only path. Co-ops aren't necessarily for everyone. Like I believe in them, but I think they're one of many strategies to transition towards the next economy, to democratize the workplace, to democratize our communities, to build community wealth, whatever framing you want to use. I think it's sort of I've been trying to really like obviously skill up in co-op specifically, and I'm a facilitator. My background is as a teacher and a facilitator, and I working to be a trainer and a technical assistance provider to support co-ops, but to really understand that they're again part of a broader ecosystem, and just to have like to not just preach at people that this is the only path, but I do think it should be on the radar. And I think part of what's the challenge here in Connecticut is it's just really not on the map for most people. I think it's not something that policymakers, funders in particular, are even aware of and are advocating for as a one of the strategies to address the economic inequality, the like really vast racial economic inequality that exists here in Connecticut. So I think part of I think part of what maybe I'm losing the plot, but I think it's just been trying to like do a lot of just the collective consciousness raising around the concepts of co-op and the concepts of an ecosystem, even thinking of ourselves as part of an ecosystem and bringing that lens to this work, and that it's not just about starting a business. It's about actually thinking about how are we as businesses working together, how are we building coalitions, because not one business alone, one organization alone isn't going to cut it to really kind of address the issues we have. So I'll stop there.
Love that. I love the metaphor of who's on the map, and literally starting with that map, seeing that one group in Connecticut comes from a rich legacy, and it took many forms, there was a spirit about it, and they're bringing it back alive in that new context of their new lives here in this country. So I feel like that's very powerful, and even thinking beyond the map to the ecosystem. So getting on the map and then recognizing kind of the depth of the map, the ecosystem. So I love that. I want to invite Steph, Desi to share the same. How are you guys helping to invite people in and unburden this concept? How are you helping to define, or otherwise make clear what your connection to the co-op world could be? So we'll start with Desi.
Yeah, I guess I want to speak to embracing, this vulnerability, well, when it comes to growth. And, I think for healing, when you think about healing systems, you've got to be vulnerable. And some of that for me has really looked like, taking the time to do the research, and find the past pain points in the community, where projects have started up and maybe stopped, and taking the time to learn, well, why did this stop, and where, what was the stopping point, and what grew and what kind of just sat there and has been like collecting dust, and how do I pick that up and repurpose it, and bring it to the light again. And so, I think that, yeah, that's really been, how I'm bringing the spirit of healing to the project work, and kind of actively just like reshaping some of the narrative that is already there, instead of just kind of blowing by it, um, and showing that, that I'm gonna kind of continue to show up and recognize where, I see the spirit of cooperation, and amplify that. That's really, I think, the point for me that I've been exploring in this fellowship, looking at taking the time to do the research about the community in Maine, especially amongst, the Wabanaki tribes, getting to know their businesses, looking through business directories, and really, starting to create, culturally relevant, materials that are about this community, not about the community over here and, in this state and how they've been successful, but really looking at, what is here, and taking the time to organize it, and because, that's what I like to do. And now so I can include, artwork from, I got to, from, a fund that Four Direction offers, an artisan fund, that they, help make it possible for artisans to show up, to festivals and have a little bit of coverage. So they offer a grant for that. And so, let me, use some of the artwork from these artisans in the materials that I'm creating that are going to go out and appeal to them, and teach them a little bit about how they might work cooperatively together. So, I think for me, that's really been, where I'm exploring the healing space, and making materials that are actually about them, that show and reflect like what I see, and what I'm really learning what I'm learning from this community, what am I enjoying about it, and what I think others will resonate with as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's distinct from what we just heard in Varun's context, where people are pulling from a legacy that they no longer have access to it in a new place, right? In this context, we're saying, what is here? Dusting off those artifacts, those cultural artifacts, and using those as tools to activate and make relevant this form. So I love that in a way that's affirming people. I think that's very interesting and important, and a part of the problem we're trying to help solve. We want people to come into this work seeing themselves and knowing you're welcome here, right? Not that you have to leave yourself behind. There are things that are valuable right here, right now. So I love that. Thank you for that. Steph, you're kind of in a different scene. You've mentioned you've been in this game trying to build your business, and I've heard many times about the challenges of that, getting new members in and keeping this thing going. How do you create the next generation of cooperators like yourself? And I think in the Black community, because you're seeing these immigrant communities doing this work, we actually have a rich heritage of cooperation, right? Some of us have come into that knowledge through Collective Courage or other books, Marcus Garvey, whatever the case is. But, there's a rich heritage that we've been disconnected from. And so you're now, 10 years in the game, living that story out, how do you see the future of this moment? How are you inviting folks in? How are you helping to unburden this for the next generation moving forward?
Yeah, a lot of it's just like modeling, just like being being out in the front, like showing people like, oh, you can do this, like you can actually do this. I'm fortunate to have uh entered cooperative ecosystem that is very rich, New York City. It existed before me, and is more resourced than most, you know. And so I came in with certain conditions that were already there. I was like fortunate and privileged to be able to do that. And also, um, because African Americans have a rich history of cooperativism, I could always look back and I can point people to the books, to the history. I can say like, look this up. Like a lot of people can't do that, like say, go to this. I'm gonna send you this article. You should read this book. We don't all have those resources. And so yeah, it's a different, I entered in it differently. So now I just bring people in, like I say, come see us do this, come volunteer, come help us do this. We're doing this event, we're doing this and that. It's yeah, it's just I feel like I've just been fortunate to be able to include people in the neighborhood, and also because I do food. Food is like, it's easy to get people involved over food. Like you say, like I'm gonna, we're gonna have this dinner, or we have these vegetables here. Like people get excited, and so it's been like a much easier pathway to adoption when people are able to get excited about something that they can touch and they can feel and they can be a part of. And so it's definitely been fun. The biggest challenge is to like make the business work, it's just for sustainability, and so that we can continue to do the work that we're doing. Like it's the business part of it is the part that gets tricky, because we're a cooperative, and um we're structured as a cooperative, doesn't mean that we're not a business. And so like just having people seeing us like succeed in business in itself is definitely something that, and then people are like, oh, you're a cooperative too. Oh, maybe cooperatives can work since they're doing it. Like, why can't it work for all of us? So just like being around, always saying like, we are a cooperative, and and we're still here. We've been here for almost 9 years.
Excellent. Yeah, I think your story is interesting to it in yet another way. You're in this rich environment, but you don't see yourself. You're absent in this environment where there's so much support for co-ops. It just looks like other people are doing it and not you. And how making something gets, getting started with a business that can be a cooperative, just being present and being seen can help change things, and of course, food. You got to get food in whenever you can. So, I think these three stories are great. And next, we're going to invite up the whole site to think about how these stories come alive in context, but getting on the map, right? Literally looking at the map, seeing what's going on there, dusting off the artifacts, right? And showing up with food and just showing up. I think even if you don't see yourself, great stories, and dropping some gems on us. Thank you, guys. So we're gonna write up some of the host sites. We've got Coach Carmen, we've got Gabby, got Jock. What's going on, guys?
Hey, good evening.
Hey, welcome. And then we've got Coach Carmen too. Spotlight her, Coach Carmen Duncan.
Hello.
Excellent. So thank you guys for being here. I want to invite you to introduce yourself and, add your chapter to this story, right? How did you get here? Some of you were familiar with co-ops, maybe you weren't, but you're somehow a host site in this fellowship, and you're about co-ops now, right? So I want to invite you to introduce yourself. What does your organization do, and how'd you get here? We can start with you, Gabby.
Good evening, everybody. Hi, Johan. I'm Gabby Pereira. I am part of the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust. We are an informal network of more than 700 farmers and land stewards of color through the Northeast. That is from Maine to Maryland, Delaware. So currently steward land or have food businesses that can grow food for our communities it's problematic. The entry point of purchasing land is unaffordable for most of our communities, or food aggregation distribution has not been led or be part of BIPOC communities ownership or leadership. So in our program, Land Network Services, we were approached multiple times for people that said like, hey, we want to work collaborative on managing land, on stewarding land. How can we go about this? Or, hey, we are a group of farmers in the state of New York, very close by regionally. How can we work together with food distributors and aggregators to reduce the cost of marketing? So, in talking to CFNE for a possible lender for land access, it became very clear that having co-op developers in our community was necessary. So I got the invitation by Carolyn to be part of this fellowship, to be a site, a host site. And I will give it stop there because I want to give a space to Coach Carmen and Jake.
All right, thank you. Glad to have you here, and it's very important work you're doing. Coach Carmen, I want to invite you to share a little bit about yourself, the organization, Mission Accomplished, Co-op Connection, and how you got here. What brought you to the cooperative world?
Good evening, everyone. Mission Accomplished Transition Services is a career and business education organization for teens and young professionals up to the age of 35 who are seeking to develop and provide educational initiatives in the community, as well as build their personal brand as social impact professionals. Specifically for individuals who are in the fashion, beauty, construction, interior decorating, and mural painting industries. We really help our students get to the next step in their career journey. So they come to us, they know what they want to do. Our responsibility is to help them with gaining clarity around the next steps and helping them connect to the appropriate resources so that they feel confident with continuing their process and their journey. I got connected to the co-op, to CFNE, because I must be a person that operates in a way of being in community, and I shouldn't say must be. I'm very much committed to the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, which 2 of those principles are cooperative economics and collective work and responsibility. I am a true believer that in order for us to move forward, we have to make a commitment to working together, and that my sister and my brother's problems are my problems, and we create solutions together. That we have to trust each other with our money by investing in one another. And that could be from purchasing goods and services or making a donation to a social impact nonprofit organization that's providing services for individuals within the community. Black Wall Street is definitely, I am inspired by Black Wall Street, and I am a true believer that we can bring that back. So that is in our respective communities by having a mini Black Wall Street. So because of the way that I operate, and I'm very clear about my mindset and how I need to show up in the community, it was only natural to be connected to the co-op connection here in the capital region, because the focus was for us to develop develop communities that allowed for smaller businesses to be able to pop up at vendor fairs, or we also talked about having focusing on e-commerce. So it was an opportunity for individuals to be able to invest their money to create this community so that we could work collectively, so that we show that we do work together in order to build up our community. So it's been a pleasure being a part of the process and being able to share my area of expertise, which is very much systems. I'm definitely a systems person, or have grown into being a systems person, and really understanding that when we have systems in place and they're documented, it makes it that much easier to create legacy businesses that live beyond us. And for the individuals who start, so as a founder, me starting is like, I need to do this and I need to do that, and holding all the pressure on my shoulders. But I learned through the journey that a part of working with people is trusting people with your intellectual property, so that you are able to work in collaboration and everyone is on the same page of what's next. And if I need to call in sick one day, I'm not feeling like something can't get done because I'm not there, because I trust the individuals who are a part of the group, the company, whatever. So I feel like that's the role that I played. And then also when it comes to event planning, event coordinating, and event production, the coordinating piece and making sure that things are organized at an event are definitely other areas that I enjoy bringing to the table in any group.
Sure. Appreciate you. Yeah, we both share love for Nguzo Saba, the Kwanzaa principles, and Ujamaa is my favorite, cooperative economics. So, as a powerhouse lady, I know Coach Carver, personally up here in the capital region, it's funny to balance those two things, moving things forward as an individual who has a vision, and yet seeing the power of community. So appreciate that. Jacques, I want to welcome you to introduce yourself, the organization, and how you got here.
Yeah.
What is fellowship?
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Yeah. It's been quite a journey. So I'm with Four Directions, and Desiree gave quite a bit good information. Again, just briefly, I'm involved with community development and business development for the tribes, and our main focus, social and economic conditions that we try to improve for each of the tribes. And she mentioned the Maliseets, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot. Those are the tribes of Maine, and we do it a lot through education, which is what this has been a part of, and Desiree is a part of, which we've been discussing. Technical assistance and providing all kinds of services that I oversee with feasibility studies and such. And then in key areas such as affordable housing is a great need. Tribal businesses, which can be the own businesses that the tribes own, but as she highlighted native entrepreneurs and small businesses as a key part that is lacking and has to be built up and expanded upon, where it will help um, the economy and help build the tribal economy and also improve the regional areas of Maine, because the tribes are located in really two of the most depressed counties in the nation, which is Washington County and Aroostook County. So there's a lot of progress, but the opportunity is great for the state of Maine, as the tribes, if they prosper, they will also pull up local communities as well. A lot of issues. It's been interesting. I'll step back for 1 second. My background, I've found cooperatives, and I know we'll have some other questions, but cooperatives, I learned the value of. I lived in Europe a lot, and I've done a lot of work in Africa as well. I have a Wall Street background, investment banking, but in college I learned the value of cooperatives in Italy, for example. I love wines and got to know a lot of cooperative organizations in the regions of Italy, where a lot of the wines are small wineries, but they do have cooperatives in their area, in their regions, and I got to know several of these, and it's fascinating to see it at work. Some are small, and some are quite significant. And then my wife's German, so I learned about a lot about German businesses. So cooperatives in Germany and Europe have many different structures and are, multi-billion-dollar ventures. So with that as a backdrop, and I think we've highlighted it, the U.S. has some significant co-ops that we know of, but the room for expansion is incredible, and it has great potential for communities and for individuals. So I think it's something that we need to further and hope we further explore. With that, for tribes, I see the co-ops being a natural fit. It really fits the potential for certain tribal businesses, the structure where there are a lot of family and individuals, but also group activities. So I think for the tribals, literally the tribal governments have room for cooperative structures. But what I'm also seeing, what we've learned, and also with Desiree, is that they're also individual tribal members, and across these tribes can form co-ops, and just a wonderful opportunity. So that's kind of how we got here with discussions, and just early on, CFNE came to us. Micah came to us, and I just immediately was like, I just feel that co-ops have a great potential for the tribes of Maine.
Gotcha. So that was pretty good. I mean, you're getting into some of the thoughts I'm having, Jack, just how exposed you've been to co-ops across the globe have helped you to see that we can do things with the tribal government at scale. We can do things in smaller artisan or, entrepreneurial ventures in the tribe. And so you see it taking shape in a variety of ways, right? And maybe that's some of the learnings that you've gotten and the implications for how it could be done there. And I love that idea of the interdependence between the tribal community and the larger community there in Maine too. I feel like that is pretty significant. But I want to invite Gabby to speak on that. Your fellow was Steph. What are some of the implications for how you grow your offering, this big issue, this land issue? What are some of the implications for how NeedFolk is going to have an impact and grow its offering because of these experiences?
Yeah. So as a Latina woman, I'm very familiar from my homelands of what cooperative and collaborative working is within the economical development of different businesses, right? So when Steph started to be part of this fellowship, we very quickly identified that creating more co-ops for the sake of creating more co-ops might not be the immediate solution that we need, right? When we talk about land ownership in the United States, specifically in the Northeast, we know that 7% of the land belongs to single family owners. Most of them are white men, led by white men on the age of 58, 55 to 58 years old. So we're looking into a great opportunity of transferring farm businesses and farmland that is key for the well-being of our communities. And the affordability of these businesses that are retiring it's not there. So collaborative working, cooperative ownership, cooperative management has been proposed as one of the entry points to transfer all these exit farm businesses that are there, but the farmers are about to retire soon. Another point is that it is not only have access to the land, it's like from having access to the land and growing the food, currently a farmer cannot feed their family by feeding their community. So how we reduce the cost of distribution and aggregation to maximize the revenue of farmers, right? And at the same time, without increasing the price of food for our community. Because we know that BIPOC communities are the ones that have less access to fresh food, right? So we are, and it was the idea of staff to create this ecosystem to understand what is the capacity of production, aggregation, distribution, sales, value-added products, how that tied into bigger picture of now that if we have the land access, how we go about housing, right? So how we go about health insurance for farmers, right? So something that doesn't exist. So we are now that we are starting to see that the ecosystem is possible, that we have momentum there. What are the points that we need to develop together as a community? Like Coach Carmen said, like we are in this all together, and the growth of one is the growth of everybody, right? So how can we fortify or create a food system that works for us, by us?
Yeah, I think that's powerful. You know, if 98% of the land is concentrated over there, that means we've got 2%. So we don't have a lot of power in that circumstance. And so it necessitates working together, and creating one cooperative enterprise is not enough, right? So you guys decided we're not just going to create a cooperative enterprise here and there. We're going to look at this ecosystem and look at how people are connected, recycling value, right? And bringing that human life, these farmers who are bringing food to our communities, sustain our lives, bringing that into the focus. So I love all of that. You know, it's kind of not what you would expect as an outcome to say, oh, no, we're not going to create cooperative enterprise. That's how we're going to move things forward. But it's so brilliant to think, no, actually, we need the ecosystem. And how do we put what's there?
And we will get there. We will create cooperative enterprises. But if the infrastructure to hold that is not ready, is not mapped out, it's very likely that they will fail. Even though we are creating cooperative, but if they exist in isolation, in a system that is against them, it's very likely that they will fail. So identify the ecosystem first, for staff, and I felt like the very first step.
Yes, I agree. I think it's a powerful insight. So thank you for sharing that. And, that's a lot about capacity, and we think about capacity, the capacity of these locally led, community-centered organizations to implement on this work. You guys have limited capacity, the communities have limited capacity, and that capacity is supported or eroded based on how well we can work together, right? Trust. And Jacques talked a lot about trust and how that relationship between communities, within the tribal context, the main context, how do you have trust to move things forward? Because you lose trust, you lose capacity, right? People come, people go, projects come, projects go. That's what Desi talked about. How do you build on when you're losing ground? So I want to invite Jacques to speak a little bit more about any thoughts you have on that before we
No, it was excellent discussion, and yeah, I think with the tribes, yeah, capacity, people are really spread thin, and the capacity is a major issue, and that's where we try to bring in the right technical assistance to help, and support the tribes and find ways that we can expand, not just positions, but also structure and organize efforts. But trust is a major issue, major concern for tribes all over the country, not just Maine. Working among themselves, issues that a heritage that they have to work with in a positive way, but also rebuilding trust is just central. But also the cultural aspects. I think that's something that which we've touched upon. But yeah, and each tribe has its own distinct culture, but they also work in a confederation or a federation or an overarching structure. So that's something that we're trying to do, is also create, if you will, the Wabanaki consciousness, the Wabanaki brand, which has been there for many centuries, I mean, a long time. And these individual tribes, though, each also have their own territories, their own again heritage that they want to enhance, protect through development, their unique languages, which many are being really under threat. I think a key thing is youth workforce development, youth development culturally is a key issue. And I think when we come up with ideas that are good, they really have to come from within the community. The community has to decide what they want, how they want to move forward. It has to be a grassroots up and something that they feel called. So it's not something that you can force upon them. You just can offer opportunities and educate, like, hey, there are many options here, like especially with co-ops, and many different ways you could go. But you have to find the path that will work for you in each tribe, and give that time. And I think that's what Desiree, well, what I've experienced. I'll let Desiree speak for herself, but it's a process, and it's a lengthy process. And you can sit there as an outsider and look and say, well, look, we could do this, and it sounds simple, whether it's a business idea or even a business plan, and it's logical and rational. That even me, coming from an investment banking background, it's like, well, this is what you should do. These are the steps. Doesn't necessarily always work, and it's like, well, why didn't that work? And it's these other aspects that you have to be sensitive to. And creating a co-op or any venture, you also have to give space for like the circle time for the tribes, and conflict resolution has to kind of be baked into these systems also, because you're going to have misunderstandings. It's going to take there's things you're coming into that you don't even know are there, that you're touching upon, that you have to, like, oh, I had no idea that. And I found this not just with American tribes, but I've done a lot of work in Africa. It's like, wow, you really have to, you can't possibly be sensitive to everything, and you have to be careful that you're never creating a top down approach where it's like, hey, I've got the answers coming to you. It can't, it never works, or very rarely. It just creates more hostilities and just delayed reactions. So you have to give time for things to work and be let them put their own cultural aspects and build the trust that they have control, and that this is in their best interest. So I hope that answered your question there.
No, that's okay. Thank you. You guys are sharing a lot of valuable lessons, and I want to bring some of that to Coach Carmen. You know, we're both in the capital region of New York State, and from my experience, there's a lot of disconnection. You're coming into this work, you know, how do we bring people together to do business together? And you're coming into that from the Nguzo Sabo Kwanzaa principle, right? A very community-centered set of ideas. And how do we bring that to the larger capital region, right? Which takes trust within that group, it takes trust between groups, and we know it's still disconnected. So over the past 2 years, you've been working with the Co-op Connection, which is a group of separate organizations trying to come together to create that trust in the capital region to support the larger capital region ecosystem in a way that's authentic and inclusive. What do you see as the things that you've learned from this process that we need to do to create a successful cooperative ecosystem here?
I believe us having a team of people who are committed to traveling to the 3 Tri-City areas and collecting that qualitative data on what's needed, and what are the conflicts, right? So it's like, you know, well, first is what's the conflict? So it's starting with the problem, right? And then it's what are the solutions that you wish we had right now? If you had a magic wand and you created a solution in order for us to work better together, what would that solution be? And I believe if we had a group of maybe 4 people who was focused on this work over a 3 to 4 year period, and there's an extensive amount of documentation and, you know, and bringing groups together to have conversations, including those very hard conversations, because I do believe that a lot of our splintering is that we've harmed each other, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. So we naturally go into protective mode. So I'm not going to work with this person. You know, I'm not going to work with this group. But the reality of it is that in any family, in any family or any community, at some point your feelings are going to get hurt for whatever reason. And as long as it's not egregious, we have to have those conversations to move through what the pain was, and then also allow time for healing, right? Like we can't, we're not going to get over it tomorrow, but allow that time for healing, and having maybe one of those individuals who's doing that Tri-City work be a mental health professional who understands what cooperative living and cooperative working is, because we're hurt, you know, whether it is the trauma from the way that our society operates. So there's a level of distrust that we have for each other just by the way that the media may present us, and then just the hurt that we inflict on one another. So I do believe that if we had a core group of people who were willing to create that thread between all of us in order for us to figure out how to move forward, that we then would be able to move forward with some solutions and truly work cooperatively.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like you and Jock touched on this conflict resolution thing, you know, and in the capital region, we're talking about a Tri-City area. Not only conflict resolution within a group, like we're trying to do to create some type of growth in the cooperative economy, but across geographies and even across generations, right? How do we bring conflict resolution into our organizations within the context of the organization, across geographies and across generations? So just want to say thank you guys for those gems dropping them on us. We're going to have more to come, but I want to invite up Tama and Todd with our next 15 or so minutes that we have on this line to share a little bit more about their experience as mentors, as trainers, as service provider professionals, in this case, financial and legal, to help our fellows learn about what is needed. So welcome tomorrow, Todd. Not sure if we have another trainer, but let's keep rocking with you guys. Good to have you guys. So I want to invite you to introduce yourself and what is your work and how did you end up doing this work in the cooperative space? Why is that important? So Todd, you can go first.
Good evening, everyone. Todd Arena. I'm an attorney, one of the senior staff attorneys at Albany Law School's Community Economic Development Clinic. And before that, I was, an attorney, corporate lawyer down in New York City. I actually met Steph from my time in the city. And I think that was sort of my journey to co-ops was a long one. The abbreviated version, as I'd spent some time, especially around law school time, doing study abroads, and then sort of, in summers, working abroad or interning, volunteering, in different, in India, South Africa, and then South America, various countries in South America, particularly Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador. And, as Gabby and many others have mentioned, co-ops are not, rare in many places, especially in what's sometimes referred to as the global South, or, the global majority, or, people talk about it in different ways. And I think it was always an inspiration to me. And I was like, oh, why don't we have that back home? And, and then coming back and having the opportunity to live in New York City, as Steph said, that, there's actually quite a bit of a resource ecosystem, especially, in that time period, accelerated in like 2012, and when there was like a city council budget put towards co-op development and supporting the co-op ecosystem, sort of became something that was always there, and to something that became, even bigger, and formalized in a certain extent, formalized in not a negative way, let's say, in a co-op way. And realizing that, oh, my gosh, there's actually a lot of co-ops here, and really being interested and drawn to, the question of, I remember one of the earliest things I did when I was still in the corporate law world is attend a SELC training, the Sustainable Economies Law Center out of Oakland, California. They, had dragged Janelle Orsi all the way to New York City to do a CLE, which is like a training for lawyers who are already lawyers, sort of thing. And one of the questions at that, conference was, why aren't there more co-ops? And, why are the only co-ops that you've heard of, Latina immigrant owned, and, or credit unions? And there were, it was always an interesting question of, what is the historical factors involved? And that's always been sort of an intellectually interesting thing for me. But I think, what it led me to is realizing that, co-ops are communities. Really any joint enterprise, even corporations, are communities in that sense. They're just communities that are structured in a very specific hierarchical way, where the power and control goes in one direction, and down, and then the resources go back that direction. And co-ops are really sort of a way of thinking about how sharing work as a community can have resources, power, and influence flow in different directions horizontally. And part of that resource question, of course, is the question of external third-party support or specialist vendors, however we want to talk about it, but like effectively lawyers, accountants, financiers. And one of the things that I think has been a really interesting development since the time that I've been really paying attention to it, since 2011, 2012, and doing what I can to support in various ways, as first as members of different co-ops, and now as trying to do more as an attorney to support that the space, is the number of folks like myself who are coming from those specialized technical backgrounds, who are more willing and more interested in serving the space. And sort of, I remember one of the early meetings in 2012 in New York City, the big question at what do we do with all the city council money that was just passed. New York City Council, for many of us who might think of city council, that's not a lot of money. In New York City, city councils have a lot of money. And so it was an actual real question of what to do with that. And at the time it was, well, we need more lawyers. We need co-op lawyers. And I like to think that to an extent now, 10 plus years later, there's more co-op lawyers. There's at least a national community of co-op professionals, which is predominantly lawyers, serving the space. Still probably too few of us and growing, but I think we've solved to an extent, the legal gap question, although there's regional differences, and it's always a tough capacity, as Johan, you said, the capacity is always a major issue. And now the thing that I hear more often coming up with a lot of the small startup co-ops is a lot of the questions that they bring to me, I realizing are not strictly like a lawyer can be as helpful as we can be, but a lot of times it comes down to having a good accountant or a bookkeeper who can actually help you implement a practical system, not just a theoretical or abstract, this is how the money flows, but like, how do you create a system to collectively share the money flowing through the co-op. And so I'm sort of excited to see maybe over the next 10 years a push for more bookkeepers and accountants who are interested in helping create those internal systems, which are also go a long way to protecting co-ops, because I think one of the things I see as a lawyer, and this has been many years in the coming, but is likely to accelerate, is more pressure on tax law compliance and the need to be really smart and careful about and intentional about how you document, how you track and account for your decision making, and have the receipts to support what you're doing, because the word on the street is that where there's a lot more pressure on that. So I think having the support of an ecosystem and the technical providers is going to be all the more important.
Excellent. No, that's great. We've touched on a lot of things, so not even have to do too much follow-up with Todd. We got the essential, the legal and the finance. So let's hear a little bit from Tamar, my friend. Introduce yourself, what's your work, and how did you come into this? Yes.
Yeah, I think Todd framed my coming into the space very perfectly. My name is Tamar Yisrael, and I'm an accountant, bookkeeper in the cooperative space. I also support cooperatives by also doing business development coaching, supporting and creating those systems that Todd spoke of on how to track the money, keeping track of the receipts, etc., and being able to produce the receipt. So it's really exciting to hear you frame it up in that way. I'm currently joining you all from New Orleans, Louisiana. And part of really what, for me, learning about the cooperative space as a formal structure happened because I joined a food co-op. But Much like I think Steph mentioned earlier, the landscape of being in cooperation, being human, being able to work together as community, the cooperatives and that whole energy resonated with me because of how I was brought up. I grew up in a former mining community in Birmingham, Alabama. And so when the industry dried up, the resources dried up, the ability to meet needs in community became harder. And so people in that community worked together. They worked to bring a school to that community, worked to help us actually have the education that we needed. Now, eventually that school was annexed to a county, but the collaborative and cooperative effort to really bring that about was inspiring. And so taking that from my own experiences and seeing communities that have been divested, I see an opportunity for cooperatives to create space for folks to own the resources that others are, they bring either take away from community, extract, and then those communities are left scratching for resources. So what if the communities were able to actually take those resources and self-manage and self-govern? And so I see cooperatives as a way to lead into how we can do that work. I came into really supporting cooperatives from an organizing lens. One of the things I saw, especially here in New Orleans, was that the workforce didn't have opportunity to like really have sustainable wages, maintain sustainable employment. And of course, the wealth gap is, amazing in a place like this where everyone's so close. But I imagine this is the case in most communities across the country. So being able to see that as a small swatch of here in New Orleans, I feel like that's something that we experience all over the country. Communities that are divested, where there were industries and those industries are no longer there. Workforce needing access to meaningful and gainful work. So I saw an opportunity to bring the lens of cooperative organizing as a tool for us to like figure out how to manage our resources. It also inspired me to dust off my hat because I had not really retired, but stopped doing accounting work professionally to be a community organizer. I saw a gap in the ability for community-based programs to really maintain their books, to be accountable and in compliant when resources were available. So I dust off my accounting hat and started my own practice. And from there, I was able to really lean in and support local co-ops. But soon, when folks heard that there was someone who knew cooperatives, knew accounting, the landscape opened up and I began to support cooperatives across the country. And you're right, there is a very huge gap in technical assistance providers, professionals that are familiar with how cooperatives operate, why people organize cooperatives. And again, most people are looking at that business as usual, technical assistance services, when we really have to be, those of us who know, like yourself, Todd, when you know, people are doing cooperatives as a way to meet needs. And so all this business as usual and status quo might not be relevant. So our work is really to come in and help people achieve what they want to achieve. Um, even being compliant, but not with the same business as usual lens. So that part was really important to me. Not cutting corners, but how do we navigate the current system in a way that protects the cooperatives so that they can actually be sustainable, they can actually meet the needs of membership. And really, for me, cooperatives are designed to meet the needs of members. That's the whole core, the reason why we do this, and really change that dynamic where we've seen big corporation come in, extract resources, leave those communities depleted, and then the people of those communities are looking and scratching to figure out how to meet their needs. So I won't take up too much more time because I know we are approaching that end time, but I just really feel like Todd said a big piece. and just paved the way for me to come in and just name. I do appreciate this cohort and the navigators for doing the work, because this is really a high need.
Excellent, excellent. And yes, we're near the end, but we'll go another 5. People can tolerate that because this is so rich. In fact, this is getting to the core of what this fellowship has been all about. Business as usual is about monopolizing resources, right? As Gabby said, 98% of the land is owned over here, right? And as a technical expert, whether it's legal or accounting, you're coming in and you're playing with that system to try to get people to do certain things in a way that comply. And unless you have that cultural context, you know, you're not able to really help people to bring this possibility of the cooperative enterprise home, right? I think of it in terms of coevolution. You guys come from these institutions that are disconnected from the communities in terms of legal or accounting. A lot of times they come in, this is how you do it, right? They don't have that cultural context. It's disconnected. People show up to their offices and they leave themselves behind. They don't feel at home accessing those services they need. But you guys are interesting in that you've been able to reconcile the technical and the cultural, right? You grew up in it, Tama, you know, and it was a part of your regular practice as a human being. And then you gained the technical skills and your community organizing and accounting, and you did both of them until it churned together in a sweet little soup. So I think, you know, Louisiana soup, New Orleans gumbo. So I feel like, you know, that's so brilliant. And that's kind of where I want to take this, right? And you mentioned about your experiences, Todd, being all over the place, helped you see these things. And so how do we help the emerging generation of what I would call homegrown co-op developers, right? Some homes are dried up, we got to pour some resources into them. But how do we cultivate coevolution? These evolving institutions who can understand the cultural context a little bit more, and the evolving ability of communities to engage and interact with the technical assistance and resources it needs to really thrive and flourish in the cooperative space. So give you guys a chance to give, you know, 30 seconds or a minute. What do you guys think can support this idea and help bring home this concept to the emerging generation of co-op developers?
I'll say quickly, I have a theory. When I realized, you know, just from a financial perspective, that the hugest challenge we face as a people on this planet is that a small percentage of the world's resources, I mean, a large percentage of the world's resources are owned by a very small percentage of the population. I think if people knew and connected to that imbalance of power, I think we, as those of us who know, have a responsibility of shedding light on this imbalance. We know it, we feel it, we experience it, but we don't know the context and the magnitude of it. Cooperatives present an opportunity for ownership and really striking the match in that imbalance and changing that dynamic. So I feel like there's some work to do in educating on why things are so disproportionately out of balance. And that's really because a very small percentage of the population is in control of everything. So I'll stop there because there's more to say behind that, but we don't have time for that.
No, I think it's important. Ownership, right? 98% own, you know, most of it. If we own some, that's gonna slowly pour resources into our community. And it doesn't even have to be that slow, right? How do we engage ownership? So love that, Tamar. Teaching the importance of that. Todd?
Yeah, I think education is key. Education about facts, education about you know, the cultural competency, and having, you know, I think having like I work at an you know, a PW, like a long established old institution, one of the first private law schools in the nation, or the oldest still existing law school in the nation. And when you're working at institutions like that are slow to change, and that's one thing I've seen. And it hasn't moved as quickly as I would like. That's and that's been something that I've noticed, and there's a frustration and a justifiable frustration that many people, especially in the community, feel about wanting to see change move faster. And I think one of the things that I've seen that does work is, yes, having new ideas and younger people come in with different ideas, but I think also like partnerships between new institutions outside that with people that are working with those institutions, those, if we have more co-ops outside and I can have students work with them and be inspired by that work, and hopefully they will be the kinds of attorneys that want to do that when they're in private practice after they've graduated, or maybe even go to work at supportive institutions that are focused, worker employment centers, or co-op loan funds, things like that. For example, cooperative bookkeepers, or technical assistance, wraparound services. That's one way to see those shifts and change. But I think ultimately I do think having new institutions, partnership or not, the success of those institutions just creates a challenge economically that established institutions can't ignore. And that sort of goes to my final point, is I think the best thing we can do is make sure co-ops can make enough surplus to pay lawyers and accountants that will then be full-time co-op lawyers and accountants. Not me, but my students. This is not, self-pleading, but, just speaking for, that's what I think makes for a strong sector, is, strong co-ops, in a sense.
Love it, love it. So I think for both of you, exposure on both sides, our communities, to this imbalance of ownership in the world and the country. How do we embrace the power of ownership? And to these institutions, just seeing co-ops that work in these communities and, accepting that threat. That's what it is. We got to deal with the economic sabotage later, but being exposed on both sides to each other, I feel like, is very powerful. And having co-ops that work, introducing our community to ownership, and having co-ops that work so that the service providers can spend the time that's needed there. So I want to thank you guys for sharing this. I'm gonna share my screen and just provide a few closing slides for folks as we move into the end of this webinar. So I want you to imagine this blank canvas of your ecosystem, right? And consider, what is disempowering about engaging in co-ops for your co-op interested entrepreneurs and organizers, right? What is stopping them, right? I'm thinking about power in terms of the ability to create change. What stops co-op interested entrepreneurs and organizers from believing they can change the status quo, the business as usual? What stops your co-op interested service providers from doing so as well, right? Your loan firms, your lawyers, your accountants, and your community-centered organizations, the folks who are truly able to embody the sentiments and the cultural aspirations of the people they're serving, right? What is this empowering in your environment, in your neighborhood, for these players? And how will you enable them to co-evolve, to expose themselves to each other and allow them to change because of that exposure? So that's a question I want to leave folks with watching this webinar today and in the future. And if you have questions or information about the 2022 to 25 cohort of the Co-op Navigator Fellowship, you can always check out the slide deck, and you can always go to our website to see some of our media. Our YouTube page also has these interviews and these conversations and these collective recollections with our community. And if you're looking to get started in a co-op, schedule an intro call with us or just email us. So I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today and who's watching this in the future. We give thanks for your efforts and for helping us to create a new way forward. Thank you.